Good evening. That's a good way to start. It must be 7 o'clock because I heard someone's phone, so that sounded great. My name is Mike Kefeber, Superintendent, MSD of Wabash County, but also graduate of this school, 1981. My dad was actually a teacher here from the beginning of Southwood, 1962, all the way through 1987, when unfortunately they had an early passing. Also, my wife was a graduate of Northfield. All my children graduated from here. And so I'm very excited to be able to talk about our new possibilities, the new school informational meeting that we have tonight. A lot of excitement to that, and we will go over that. So let me just say, as an educator, we look at an anticipatory set, and we talk about what's going to happen tonight. So we have slides that we're going to present, and then we will have a school board member that will present and talk a little bit, and then we'll ask for questions and answers. But at this time, I want to introduce the people that are here that will also speak. Dr. Chris Kuhn, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. Mr. Tim Drake, Chief Academic Officer. And then we have 3 board members here tonight. Mr. Kevin Bowman will be speaking. Also, Mr. Todd Daisy and Mr. Matt Driscoll. I guess they didn't want to stand up and wave and do all that, but we're glad they're here also tonight. So we'll go ahead and begin, and I'll start with looking at the first slide, Dream Big, Work Hard. That's our tagline, and that is what we are going to continue to do. And there's a lot that goes along with that, but it is Dream Big, Work Hard. If you happen to have any children in the system or grandchildren who happen to be on our call list, I think typically you'll always hear me in with our tagline, because that is what we really believe in. So let's continue on with looking. So in 2019, we had a strategic plan, and we actually looked at 4 priorities. I'm not going to read all this to you, but there are 4 different priorities. Of course, you can see what is going on here. Student achievement, recruitment and retention, financial and facilities, and technology. And a lot of what we're talking about, even though all those are very important, one that we started concentrating on to get more studies that were done is the objective number 4, which is to optimize utilization and determine feasibility of current facilities and other possibilities. So that's what we've been working and looking at the last several years. One thing I want to mention, and I really appreciate you coming tonight. This is a nice crowd. It would be nice that we have 484 people, and I think that's how many seats are in this auditorium. But I'm glad that you're here, because there are many, many meetings that we've had that we really didn't have too many people. When we actually had the strategic plan right before COVID, we actually had meetings at both Northwood and Southwood. We really didn't have too many people here. I don't think it was about COVID, because we didn't know about COVID at the time, but we did not have a lot of people. And so we went ahead, we have a lot of other meetings that we've had. These have been community communications, whether it's something that you could come to as far as a work session, or even if you could have watched it live stream. And so we've had several, but I think we're getting more momentum that more people actually come, and so we do appreciate you coming tonight. So where we came from, this picture is in our boardroom, and the boardroom in July 1 of 1959 is when MSD became a school district. And then, after that, board members looked at different ideas. They saw all the township schools, and they decided to do some of the things that we're actually looking at doing too. We like to provide more opportunities and also be more efficient. And so what they decided to do is that they would build this school, Northfield Junior Senior, or Southwood Junior Senior High School, and Northfield Junior Senior High School, and condense all those township schools. And so we're really looking at the same situation 63 years later. That was in 1959. So the history of MSD of Wabash County, of course, you already know 1959, 1962, 63 was the first year for Southwood and Northfield, and then 65 through 1980 were the next elementaries, or all elementaries, all 4 of them. So where are we today? A little bit different. We now have preschool programs, 3-year-old and 4-year-old. We also have, now instead of having 4 elementaries, we have 3 elementaries, and then 2 junior senior high schools. And then, of course, we still have White's Junior Senior High School. We have the Bridge program, which is a credit recovery program. And then we have the co-op, Wabash Miami Area Program. And then finally, Heartland Career Center. Both Wabash Miami Area Program and Heartland Career Center We collaborate with 4 other school districts, so it's the 3 Wabash County schools, or County schools, also North Miami and Peru. So what is the challenge? You know, now with technology, we can keep data and store it pretty easily. Back when we were looking at some of this data in 1976 to 1977, this was all paper, hard copies we found in the office. One thing we're looking at is just the high school right now as far as numbers. So if you look up there, the year that we found, 1976 to 77, 980 total high school students. There's a big gap there because we haven't looked or found all those records. And then finally, 2020, 2021, 509 students. 21-22 was exactly the same with 509. And the current number is about 521. So it's a lot different than what it was in 1976, 1977. Again, this is only 9 to 12, not the 7 to 12. So student opportunities. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Drake. I already introduced him, and he's going to go over a couple of things here. And we've got a nice helper here to tell us that the camera, the video, you have to stay behind that line. So that's why we're not coming up real close to you, so we can stay on the video. So just tell me when I get too close to that.
Tim Drake, you met me earlier here. My wife Shelby teaches at the Locals at Southwood Elementary, and my son Cooper Drake is a freshman here, and my daughter Grace Drake is a sophomore here. I originally came to Wabash working at White's Institute. I taught there. I was a floater for a year, and I taught there for 14 years. Position opened up here at Southwood. I came here to teach. I was a principal here for a few years, and I was able to move up to central office. And so I had a lot of connections here as well to Southwood. And so part of my job covers testing and curriculum and lots of other different avenues. But the part that's pertinent tonight is to talk about our programming. 2 years ago, I did a study to help compare our offerings at Northfield and Southwood with other schools our size. And I have some numbers here just to kind of give us a ballpark, so you know when I say what I mean by our size. Oak Hill, just down the road from where I live in Somerset, 535 students according to the IHSA classifications for this year, which makes them a 3A school. Wabash, there in town, 471 students, which makes them a 2A school. Manchester, 479, which makes them a 2A school. And now let's see these numbers for Northfield and Southwood. Northfield, 275 at the high school level, which makes them a 1A school. And Southwood, 240, which makes them a 1A school. And so I looked at all those schools there, the schools that I just mentioned, and looked at their offerings. And as I did my comparison, I found out that our offerings are very similar to what I could find out about those schools. What I am not able to see is their actual schedules. And so let me help you explain the difference. Southwood offers lots of classes. If students sign up for those classes, then we find a way to put it in the schedule. But if nobody signs up for that class, then it doesn't get put in the schedule. And so by comparing other schools, we offer, some schools offer this class and we offer that class. But generally speaking, especially across the college-bound track, we offer everything that our schools around us do. And so we felt pretty good about that. But again, the challenge is to be, what can we actually put into the schedule? And to try to help you picture that, we created this little scenario. Bobby, who is a senior in band, and he's also at Harlan Career Center. I'm going to pause here before I tell you more about Bobby. Some numbers here at Southwood. If you are a graduate of Southwood, you might remember back in the day when I was at Marion, this was the same way. You sent kids to vocational school because they couldn't cut it at academic school. Right? Oh, you're not going to do well here, so we're going to shuffle you off there. Well, those days are long behind us. Harlan Career Center does an excellent job of preparing students for careers right here in the county, careers that play a good, life-sustaining, a good family-sustaining career. And so we try to encourage kids to go, and actually I'm very proud of Southwood. Southwood has always had a very strong connection with Harlan Career Center. I've got some numbers here to tell you. 9 sophomores this year, which is 16% of the class, it's a relatively small class, go to Harlan. So 16%, 9 kids start their day here or start their day at Harlan and spend half the day there and then come here at Southwood. They're only here at Southwood for half the day. Juniors, 45%. 45% of all of our juniors are going to Harlan Career Center. Seniors, 63%. 62% of them go there. And so if I were to combine the seniors and give you another little tidbit, we offer an internship program here where our kids go and work. Some work at the sheriff's department, some work at the hospital. If you count that in there, of the entire senior class here at Southwood, only 5 are here all day. We do a great job of trying to get them out in the community, to take classes from NLSA, to take classes from IUK. And so, keeping all of that in mind, then, let's come back to Bobby. So, Bobby here has what all of us always have when we go to high school. We have to make choices. And you can see here, he loves band, but unfortunately band is offered at the same time that CAD 3 is offered, and so he has to make a choice. That is not unusual. Every school, whether it's the biggest school you can think of, Davis, Carmel, Homestead, all of their kids have to make decisions. They can't fit everything into their schedule. However, the more sections of a class you can offer, the more likely it is a student can fit those classes into their schedule. So I'm going to say that again. Our programming is very comparable. We've added some programs to other schools our size. It's the challenge for us is getting it scheduled in so kids can actually take those classes. And that comes from having a really tight section because we just don't have enough kids to sign up for those. I'm proud to say that MSD, unlike other schools, we let classes go even if there are 2 kids in the class. We had one we were going to let go with 1 kid in the class. The student chose to take it next year when they thought there would be other students in there. Most school corporations, they cut it off at 10. And so we do that because we want to make sure we offer that. And we have the finances and the staffing to continue to do that. But that presents challenges. And so when we say student opportunities, that's what we really mean. And that's the challenge to kind of let us hear from that side of the opportunities. I wanted to add this here because at a previous meeting, somebody said, oh, well, surely then with all this trouble you guys are going to have, you're not able to get your kids to be college and career ready. Well, I have lots of data I can share with you if you only gave me a few minutes tonight. But I can show you here very small classes. You can see there on our left. On our left, you can see the actual sizes of the classes last year. And on the right then are the percentages taking AP classes. And so there is still a very strong percentage, and we're able to get those kids in those classes. And so we are still preparing our kids. We're still doing an excellent job. It's better to be proactive in this rather than wait for something bad to happen. And so that's part of that thought process for that. And I chose AP, but like I said before, we're very proud to send kids to Heartland. We're very proud to get kids out to internships. And so if you have more questions about those, please come up. I'm happy to share what I know. And if I don't know it, I'm happy to try to find it.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. So building use efficiency. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Kuhn now. Again, what's the long?
Hey, buddy.
Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. I'm Chris Kuhn. Just a quick little bit about myself. I do have some connections with Southwood. I'm not from around this area, but we moved up to Wabash County. I was when I got hired as the assistant principal at Southwood here. I was here for about 3 years, and then I was the principal at Fountain for a few years, and the principal at Southwood Elementary for a few years before I stepped into my current role, which deals with mainly the operation finance side of things at the district level. So what I wanted to give you here is just kind of a snapshot. Our budgets work on a calendar year, even though our school years don't necessarily run on a calendar year. Our budgets operate that way. And so this is all of the costs that went into each of our traditional buildings for 2021. Obviously, we're in 2022 right now, so this is the most recent information from a calendar year standpoint. So what we have here on the salary benefit column is the salaries and benefit costs that go into each of those buildings. That includes any type of staffing. The capacity column shows what the enrollment was for 2021 compared to what the likely capacity of that building is. And then the column on the right is just the total expenses then. The B represents the building itself. The D represents the district, because there are also lots of several costs that aren't necessarily tied to just a building, but they are shared amongst the buildings. And so you can see what costs go into each of those buildings. Again, that does not include anything that is Heartland related, does not include anything that is area program related, and it does not include whites. This is just the cost of our traditional schools. And so to break this down a little bit, school finance is very different, I guess is the right word to put, than what maybe a typical business or things that you would typically do in your household are concerned. There's lots of rules and regulations, and those change every year. And so the two main funds that we'll be talking about tonight pertains to what we call the education fund and the operation fund. So the education fund are any expenses that are instructionally related. So instructional programming costs, teacher salary benefits, any type of instructional aid costs, etc. Those all go into education, or all paid out of education. Operation fund, which is probably the fund we're going to be talking about mostly tonight, deals with the maintenance, overhead costs, things, capital projects, things that you need to keep your district and building running efficiently. So what I did was I took those costs and broke them down by maintenance and utility costs for the year 2021, broken down by each building, and then I just made a couple categories there as far as cost per student and cost per square footage. Cost per square footage is probably a little bit better to look at because of some of the low enrollments in some of the school buildings. That can fluctuate some of the cost per student. But as far as cost per square foot is concerned, you can just kind of look at some of those things and garner some ideas just based off of that. For example, when you look at utility costs, Sharp Creek is our smallest building, but it is also our most expensive building per square foot as far as utility costs are concerned. So that just kind of breaks some of those costs down a little bit more specifically per building.
So what is the solution? I'm just going to make sure too that our cameras aren't missing each other.
Oh,
here.
sorry.
Just to make sure that, yeah, you're actually right in the view of that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I apologize.
So what is the solution? We'll just move the camera a little bit. That's the solution. So build a new high school. So grades 9 through 12, currently at Northwood and Southwood, would combine into one new high school. The current Northfield and Southwood Jr. Senior High buildings would transition into buildings for preschool through 8th grade. This would transition MSD traditional schools from 5 school buildings to 3. So student opportunities. Mr. Drake shared a lot with that, but just a little bit more. Maintain and enhance academic offerings. The main thing is to enhance also consistent course scheduling. It's interesting to note that the Indiana Department of Education has a course directory, and that course directory is almost 400 pages long. Actually, it is over 400 pages long. And just like he said, even the largest school, largest high school in the state of Indiana, which would be Carmel High School, probably does not offer all of those. But this plan would allow us to offer more. Also maintain and enhance extracurricular offerings. I would let Dr. Kuhn go ahead and talk about this one also.
So with our plan obviously is to build a new high school so that we can combine our 2 high schools and reduce our elementaries while maintaining our 2 original high schools. So we're really reducing from 5 buildings to 3 buildings. And so just wanted to kind of get a general idea of what some of that cost savings will be. Just ran some numbers, and this is a very conservative number. By taking all those costs that we just kind of talked about by each of the buildings, and then looking at one of our high school buildings, because the new high school is going to run a little bit more efficiently. It's also not going to, it's also very similar in size as these buildings are concerned. And we took the high school that was the most expensive, because each high school does have different expenses when it comes to utilities and maintenance, because, like, for example, Northfield is tied into the sewage system with the city, and Southwood has its own wastewater treatment plant. So there are some differences in costs there. Well, anyway, took the high school that had the most expensive costs and multiplied that by 3 because we have 3 similar buildings, and subtract the difference to come up with just over $700,000 a year. This is just out of operations fund, okay? Just out of operations fund. And then went even a little bit step further and looked at some staffing and some other potential cost savings that might occur down the road. And that number shot up to about $900,000. So feel pretty confident about this number as far as a minimum of savings that would be happening with this plan.
We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but another thing, just want to let you know that the possible timeline, basically the referendum passes on November 8th, and then for next year, 2023, there would be a time period where actually you would look at all the drawings, the bids, and then breaking ground 2024. The architects say that it would take approximately 3 years to complete that project, so that would mean that the first class would be 27-28, and then there would be about a 2-year transition of transitioning the junior senior highs into the pre-K through 8th grade. So then the total transition would be completed 2029-2030. If you haven't seen this, just to give you an idea of where the property is, between 150 West and 200 West on Division Road. Another landmark, of course, would be Heartland Career Center, so right across the road from that. Or another thing to look at, it's actually from 24, just south of 24 is Parkview. So, a lot of questions have been, why that location? Well, first of all, the proximity to Heartland Career Center. Mr. Gray gave you all of those numbers. We're only looking at 9 through 12 being in the building. And so we have many students that already go to Heartland Career Center. Also, the population density from the north schools to south schools, more population density on the north. And of course, the access to the major highway 24. This was just a drawing that was done by our architects, just so we could have for our variance meeting. And then we have renderings, though. You probably have seen these before. Look at brand new batteries put in this, too, and I don't know why it's dying. It still shows it's working. It still has 2 bars. It's not working all the time. So, just go through these quickly. Again, these are just renderings, so this is what it could look like. We'll see what kind of group we have here tonight, but we do have some teachers out here right now, and so they work really, really hard, and this particular teacher is running in the classroom. All right. So frequently asked questions. Frequently asked questions. How much will this cost? Well, the land purchase, the new construction, and all renovations to Southwood and Northfield, no more than $115 million. So the current tax rate is 83 cents. We'll look at that a little bit more too, because it's a low tax rate. The new tax rate will be most likely $1.34.
Yes, it works. If not, I'll use my teacher voice. So one of the things that's we're really asking people to look at is kind of step out of the present and look towards the future. And when we talk about the future, sorry, step across the line, need a buzzer or something. When we talk about the future, we're talking, 60 years down the road plus. MSD's been around for 60 plus years. This is a plan for that 60 plus years continuing, okay? And so it's hard to think about that because none of us will be around. None of us will be around in 60 years, maybe this young man. But other than that, none of us are most likely to be around. So we really asking people to kind of step out and take a look at that in the future. When we talk about the cost of the new building and our plan, we're talking about $115 million plus the potential of $700,000 a year in savings over this 60-year plan, along with only having to maintain 3 buildings moving forward. When you compare to if we just stayed the same, we have a cost estimate that Mr. Faber may talk about a little bit more for the same people that gave us the $115 million cost estimate to fix up all our buildings at $70 million. Obviously, that means we're going to continue to upkeep and maintain 5 buildings over that lifetime. And so you can see a comparison there in costs. One of the reasons that we are coming to the public for this is that when we talk about capital projects and maintenance, we get no state dollars for those types of things. The only revenue that we get to cover those things are from local property tax dollars. That are revenues that come from either our operations fund or through our debt service, which is borrowing money. Those are the only options that schools have to be able to get revenue for those types of things. Our current revenue in our operations fund, just from our local property tax dollars, is about a little over $1 million short of what our expenses are in our operation fund. So how do we cover that $1 million? We have to transfer monies over from our education fund to cover those costs. Otherwise, we would just keep going in a tunnel and losing money every year because our operational revenue does not cover the cost of maintaining 5 buildings every year. And a lot of that's just standard operational costs. So a lot of that does not include capital projects that need to come up throughout the year. So just wanted to give you that example and just kind of allow you to think, this is not a plan for just the next few years. This is a plan for the next 60 years.
And one thing that was mentioned, I said we'll talk about a little bit more later. So every time I get the mic, it's working, so I don't know why. But one thing is the $700,000 of savings. One thing that the architect, when I actually mentioned that to him, because I actually saw him this weekend, he said that you have to remember, too, there's inflation that goes along with that also. So that $700,000 that's put into this formula would actually be more. And really, the difference then of the $73 million to $70 million, obviously just $3 million over that 60 years. So even with the new rate, we will still be lower, if not comparable, to other school districts in the area. So you can see those other districts in Peru, MSD, the new rates, Oak Hill, and Wabash City. And so I did not mention, but I started my career, even though I graduated from Southwood, went to college. My first 23 years were at Oak Hill United School Corporation. I was a teacher there for 10 years, a principal at 2 different buildings for 13 years. And one thing that they tried to do, they actually had a referendum in 2011 that failed. And what they were wanting to do is they were going to build an elementary where their solar field is right now. They purchased that ground. The plan was to build that elementary there. And so that failed, and what they decided and what they had to do was they had to fix up all their buildings. And so at that time then, they put in money. They didn't have to go to referendum because you don't have to do that if it's a smaller amount. It can just be acted on by the board. And they fixed up all of their buildings. Of course, they put on all their turf fields in their their soccer field, their high school, their football field, baseball field, and even softball field, all turf. They've done everything like that, and you can see that their tax rate at this time is $1.50. Still, ours would be lower than that. I know that I also go to a lot of different games, and it seems like every time I go to those games, people ask, well, why can't we have that? Why don't we have that? Well, when it's 83 cents compared to $1.50 or $1.53 or $1.32, there are monies that are involved with that. And so you have to increase that tax rate to be able to get those other amenities. So what have we looked at before? Of course, retaining all schools. We just talked about that. The figure that we received from our architect is $70 million. Shuffling grade levels. Shuffling grade levels is needed to phase into 4 or 3 buildings over time. And the specific focus would be more on 9 through 12. Because we know in the elementary, junior high, there are ways to make those work as far as the class sizes, but when you have smaller class sizes, just like Mr. Drake was talking about with the scheduling and the master schedule, it makes it a lot more difficult. And then, of course, building a new high school. And all this came about when we started the strategic plan and finalized that in 2019 and then have those public meetings in 2020. So why now? So real estate opportunity. There's a real estate opportunity where we can build. It is on the north side, but it's close to Heartland Career Center again, population density, and also close to a major highway in 24. We're still at historically low tax rates, or interest rates, and so that's something that, even though they're going up slightly, they're still historically low. Building costs will continue to rise. That's not going to change. Retiring staff and retired debt. We haven't really talked about that at the end of there's actually 2 bonds that will be going off this year, in 2022, and the final one in 2023, so all of this can be put onto the bond for 2024. So just to give you a little idea, surrounding school district tax rates, we have been traditionally the lowest one out of the other 8 ones that we actually touch. Those are our neighbors. And also, we're in the lowest quarter, the lowest 25th percentile of the state of Indiana. Just a graph that shows the historical rates from January 2000 to May of 2022. So how big will the high school be once combined? Total of approximately 550 to 600 students. Grade levels up to 150. Current combined classes right now of those students that actually would be going in 27, 28 would be approximately, but 130. And so it would be a large 2A or small 3A. Those change every 2 years. Every 2 years it changes based on all of the other school districts or schools, high schools in the state of Indiana. So you never know for sure what that would look like. So what if the referendum does not pass? So we'll go over this a little bit slower. Our strategic plan had 4 priorities. And these 4 priorities you can see either have X's or checks. So retaining all schools really will not do anything to meet that strategic plan. The shuffling of grade levels, if we would have the high schools combined, that would allow us to be able to do more. The recruitment and retention, we still would have all those buildings. The financial situation, and then the facilities and technology, of course, it would help with that situation. So again, I think we said this figure earlier, but $70 million by our architect. They did a study to go around to all of the different buildings to get them up to where they need to be. And I go back to the whole Oak Hill thing. Since I was there for 23 years, I could say and mention that they were in that same situation. They would have built that elementary. They would have had a lot less cost, utilities, maintenance, and different things like that. But they had to spend a lot of money to be able to get all the buildings back up to where they need to be. And I was in a couple of those buildings, and so they are very nice, but it's costing them a lot of money, and they're not as efficient because they actually students there go kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, they go to Converse, then they switch over to Sweetser in 3rd and 4th, then they go to Swayze for 5th and 6th, then they go to junior high, and then they go to high school. So there's a lot of transitions where it's not necessarily the most ideal for students to have all the transitions with staffing, the office people, the teachers, all those different things, and also then, of course, just the transportation of running around to all the different buildings. So new high school does check off all of the strategic plan. I won't read those again to you, but it does meet all of our strategic plan goals. So misconceptions, you might have seen this several places, but the Department of Local Government Finance, legislators were given them a task to be able to redo all the questions. It wasn't like this just a couple of years ago, but it's new language, and it's very confusing because it's all in averages. So even though it says, your taxes will be 124.5% on average, and also it mentions the business property at 99.3%, that's not correct. What you have for that is just an average. And so what you have to do, though, is go to our tax calculator, make sure you put in a net assessment to be able to find out what your tax investment would be for this new school. Data-driven decision making, D3. One thing I learned a long time ago that we have to look at data to make decisions. So this goes a little bit different than what we've been talking about as far as just the new school. But there's been questions. Can population increase with 3 school districts in a county? So a lot of times we are compared with Northeast Indiana. And unfortunately, we are one of those counties that are losing population. So we look at the schools, because sometimes they say, okay, what can schools do differently, maybe to increase population? And so 4 other counties were looked at, in Whitley, LaGrange, Adams, and Wells, and you can see that in those counties, they have populations that are similar to us, and they also have 3 school districts with 3 high schools. The difference with us right now is we have 3 school districts, but we have 4 high schools. So if you combine Norfolk and Southwood, we now have 3 school districts and 3 high schools. And so a lot of talk has been about, how are we going to increase the population of Wabash County? And how do we look at other counties to see what they do? Well, we would be very similar if we would go with our plan to combine Norfolk and Southwood with those other counties. The next slide basically talks about, what about if you would go ahead and combine all the school districts? Well, there are 20 counties in the state of Indiana that have single or one school district. And of those 1 school districts, the 2020 census, from 2010 to 2020 census, 16 of them still lost population, 4 of them did not. So 4 of them increased, but you can see at the bottom right-hand side, Floyd, Vandenberg, and Warwick school districts, they actually are close to large population areas, like Louisville, Evansville, and the other one's Evansville. So the only one that actually increased was Brown County. Brown County Community Schools. And so, but it is close to Bloomington. So just interesting to know how we look at population, and are schools a part of that? Not, yes, a lot of questions to that. But some data that you can look at to show that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have 1 school corporation in a county. It also means that possibly that if you reduce the number of high schools, build a new high school, there could be a population increase. So again, it says 62, it should be 63 now. But 63 years later, we want to propel MSD for the next 60 years. We want to be viable for the next 60 years, just like we were when the school board decided to consolidate and then actually build Northfield and Southwood, add the 4 elementaries, and condense all those township schools into those 6 buildings. So additional opportunities for students, facility improvements, maintenance upgrades, and building use efficiency. Just a reminder, just a plug, if you're not registered, please register. That's next Tuesday is the last day to register. You might want to check and just make sure. You can take a picture of this QR code, or you can just go on our website and find out to make sure that you're registered so you can vote. So, at this time, I'll have Mr. Bowman go ahead. Sorry, I think it was Mr. Drake and Dr. Kuhn that talked longer than me. So.
Good evening. They actually gave me 2 orders. One, stand behind the line, and the second one is shorten it up, Kevin. No, they didn't tell me that. I'm so insecure, I actually brought 3 sets of notes here, so. as a board, we knew we had a challenge to get out the information clearly to everyone. That was a huge challenge, and it still is. I run into this practically every day. People say, oh, I've got all the information I need to have to make a decision, and then dialoguing with them, you find out how superficial, or really such a low understanding they actually have of the situation. So, in some senses, it's a complex situation, and in other ways I look at it as a very simplistic answer. We met, it's been referenced here in 2019. I'm just going to kind of fill you in on some of the board aspects of this. 2019, we met at the RMC building. Up until that point, we felt like we were floundering a little bit, to be honest with you. We felt like we needed direction. If you don't have a vision and direction, you end up being inefficient and wasteful. And this is a huge business. Our proposed budget that we submitted the other evening and approved was $27 million. We're the third largest employer in Wabash County. So it's a big thing. So we met at RMC. We brought in a consultant from Butler University, and she led us through an entire day. We ended up with posters on the wall for some of these priorities, and we would write on them and met in small groups. It was during that period, that day, that we, I think for the first time, seriously discussed how do we bring the two schools together. Because at the heart and soul of everything we're trying to do here is academics. We're saying, what does MSD do very well, and how can we do it even better? So oftentimes in my conversations with the public, I find I'm spending a lot of time on location and cost. And I'd like to drive the conversation actually back to our students and our children and our future students and talk about academics. The advantage of bringing our two high schools together from an academic standpoint is immense, cannot be underestimated. I just want everybody to take that home with you. We're not trying to build a building for the sake of a monument to whatever people are in positions of authority at the moment. That's not it. We're looking out down the road and we're saying what needs to start changing now to keep MSD viable as a leading school district. By the way, we're the strongest, largest, and by any metrics, the leading school district in the county, hands down. And probably a lot in the surrounding area also. So I want to just put that out there. Financially, we're strong also. When I first came on the board, we had challenges. I've been involved about 10 and a half years now. We actually finished the first or second year I was on the board $600,000 in the red in what would be our current education fund. Currently, I'm going to address this a little bit later if my mind keeps track of everything. But to say we're financially stable and financially strong is simply a fact. Let's address the location. That day we met there at the RMC building, and as many of you and most of you are aware, we're in a competitive environment now for schools, starting with Mitch Daniels' administration when things opened up. Children can attend Southwood today, they don't have to attend Southwood tomorrow. So we have to look at it a little bit from a marketing standpoint. We are surrounded by, or not surrounded, we touch 8 other school districts. So even though it seems like some people get myopic and look at Wabash City School, we're looking at the entire picture. So when you look at a marketing standpoint, we can drive market from east to west on US 24, north to south, Highway 13 and 15. I personally live 1.5 miles from Grant County. So this is a huge deal. I mean, to say we're going to shift the high schools north. However, the Hartman piece comes into play significantly. The state has changed a little bit of the importance and they've emphasized CTE, career technical education, even more than they ever have before. That's why you see the numbers, and Tim did an excellent job. That's a fact. I mean, you come here in the building sometimes during the day and you ask, where's everybody at? So to locate it next to Heartland was huge. Those students don't lose travel time during the day like they do from here. They can almost, and I think they would, pick up an entire class period of study if Heartland and the high school were that close together. Not to mention, lunch and everything else that it screws up when you have to travel. That was a big, big thing. What else was involved in location? My concerns once again was moving everything north. We have an excellent, I'm looking at Matt down here, we have an excellent board. I mean, we have excellent leadership. I don't think, hands down, it could be any place else in the state better with our administrators. And I'm looking at Matt here because Matt says, let's take a look at Southwood Wabash, and he's from the north. But as we toyed with all the possibilities, it just kept coming back that would be the best location. And we knew we had to have a location in place before we pursued the public idea of where to put the high school. I mean, the first question everybody would ask is, where are you going to put the high school, Kevin? Well, we had to have a spot. And fortunately, that worked out through a period of about 9 months of negotiation. We approached that landowner, they did not approach us. I feel very fortunate for that opportunity that we have available to us. Cost is huge. If I can get personal for a moment, I thought it'd come in around 90 million. I'm partially at fault about that happening though. In meetings with the architect, I said, we do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to have it so that people look at the thing, they come into the thing, they're going to say, yes, they did it right. So with my encouragement, to the detriment of the price, there's a number of things stuck in there. Just had a conversation with Randy down here before the meeting. $2.2 million solar panel fields in there. They just stuck it in there. One that, and I'm a sports guy, I tell people this all the time, struggling with the athletic facility cost. They're elite. Could that have been pulled out? Yeah. $11.1 million football stadium could have been pulled out. My point is, along with the $5.6 million auditorium, we could have watered the thing down. But we needed to go in there with a real number, a number that wasn't going to surprise everybody. It also helps with the purchasing of the bond, which is a one-time deal. As I look back in hindsight now, as participating board member, I wish we had probably pulled out the renovations here at Southwood and Northfield. Because if you notice the timeline up there, that's down the road. That would have made it more attractive, I guess, from a taxing standpoint. Let's move on, Kevin. Where do we go from here for referendum fails? I'll be honest with you so you get the facts. In the pipeline right now, if I could use that term, is sitting in a number of projects. We have invested the money in the last recent years at Northfield and Southwood because we knew they would be the anchor to whatever was going to be done in the future. In those projects, for example, would be gym, cafeteria, mostly a gym at Metro North. Since we have started the Little program, as they refer to it, which is now 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, the building's maxed out. Some of those children start lunch at 11:45 in the morning. No place to play in the wintertime to speak of. Excellent programs there. Our leadership there is by far number one. We don't want to see anything detract from the strength of that school and its offerings because it's grown. That's one thing in the pipeline. Number 2 and 3 would probably be the HVAC starting at Sharp Creek. Horrendous. Bad, I'll be honest with you, bad design from the get-go. Whole thing needs to be replaced. Same way with Southwood Elementary. So to say that taxes will remain the same, I'll be honest with you, taxes are going to go up. For example, that, and I'm speculating here, this is Kevin speaking, referendum fails, I would imagine in front of the board in January sometime will be approval for the Metro North project, and soon after that it'll just keep coming. Because we are fortunate that a year from now we have no debt. That was strategically done so that we were not stacking new debt on top of old debt if the referendum's approved. It's just a bad way to do business. From a business standpoint, to take something and just keep accruing or adding debt to it is not wise. So to say taxes will go down or not go up, they'll go up. I personally have a conviction, and this is once again Kevin speaking for Kevin Owen, not the board that I'm representing tonight. I believe a new high school will be built. It's a question of timing, and it's a question of who is getting the high school built for. I have a big concern that the pro-consolidation people with Wabash City think that is just a fix-it-all kind of thing. Wabash City does not have the financial strength to help build a high school. If we talk consolidation for a moment, and I'll keep moving quickly. Wabash financial situation is poor and deteriorating in my viewpoint as I study them. At the beginning of 2021, they were in the red, $1.2 million in their operations fund. They only had $54,000 in their education fund. If you recall, I said MSD is big business. Our average rounded number daily salary load is $40,000 a day. We spent $40,000 today. We'll spend it tomorrow, the day after, the day after, the day after. Wabash City would not be able to pay our salaries for 2 days. So when you look at the consolidation issue, muddling the mix, as I like to say, as a board member, it would be almost malpractice for me to want to go into discussions on that. And I take heed for that. There isn't a competent or reasonable business person that would risk their own strong financial standing to consider taking on another expense like that at the detriment of your own business. I'm proud of what we got, guys. We take the lead in everything. We're strong, we're big, and what we're trying to do here is for MSD in the future, MSD and our students. That's all I can really say. There's a lot of driving forces behind this. If you paid attention to the open letter in the papers that's been ran and reran, that's an effort, in my opinion, to impede what we're trying to do. Wabash City Schools needs MSD tax money. Currently, our taxes are figured on a $761 million assessed valuation. Through a consultant that we've hired, it's projected within 10 years, MSD net assessed valuation will be at $1.1 billion. So, from outside looking in, you can easily see that there's millions and millions and millions of dollars at stake here to be taken. So it's a serious game. And it bothers me, enough said, it just bothers me, okay? I want to close with getting a little personal here, I guess, for a little bit. My son, I got ready to come in the building tonight, and I just called him, and he said, "Dad, share from your heart." This is my home school. And I promised myself coming on the board, and I promised some of you out there, that I would fight and do whatever I could to maintain this place in existence. I want your children, your grandchildren, and now I can probably say my grandchildren in the area, I want them to be educated here. And if the plan goes through, they'll spend the first 9 years, kindergarten through 8th grade, here in this building. I have very, very deep convictions that apart from this, that 20 years from now, where we're sitting, will not be a building of education. Once again, I'm not putting people down, I'm not putting school systems down, but Wabash City has no desire to see Southwood High School remain in existence. They would prefer everything moved into town. And here we are, sitting in the southern part of the county. I hear it very frequently that we get the short end of the stick. I don't agree with that because when I follow up, explain how we're getting the short end of the stick, they never can explain that. But we are somewhat of a forgotten area, especially 124 South. That's on my heart. My family lives 124 South. Whether you agree with what I'm saying about Southwood, and for that matter, you could include Northfield, I just can tell you what I believe, and this is what I believe. I encourage you to support the effort. It's a solid plan. We have spent very much time studying and research over the last few years to develop what you see before us. It isn't hastily or haphazardly put together. It's has solid fundamentals behind it, especially, remember, especially from the academic side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. All right, we're ready now. If you have... All right, I think I'm covering up the actual list part here, so... We're ready for questions. We'll start on this side. Anybody on this side? All right, in the middle, yes.
The amount of land that you are planning on purchasing, do we need that much acreage for the buildings?
73.92 acres is what it is. Those are 3 tracks. The nice thing about that, number one, we talked about not just for the building, but also for solar field, and also if there's any other expansion in the future. Here again, we're looking at should be viable for the next 60 plus years. So we don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Who was it that said that we're not going to be here? Dr. Kuhn said that we're not going to be here in 60 years, except one young man there in the corner. So yes, it's a great opportunity for the real estate to have all those amenities and also have the solar field and to have land for the future, if needed.
Why are you willing to spend $3 million?
Actually, it's an interesting question. So by law, you have to have 2 appraisals, and those 2 appraisals actually both came in at $3 million. And so that's what we're doing. The other thing that you need to look at is we've done some studies. You can look at that too. At Beacon Schneider, you can look at that to see what how much Parkview, another nonprofit, paid. Also, it was Otis Bowen has bought all that ground right there by Kroger, and they're all very similar as far as the per acreage on that.
So it's high. Yeah, it seems like every time taxpayers are buying something, they're like price gougers. And if that's the case, I mean, if that ground's worth that much, they need to go back and pay the back taxes. Or, that's ridiculous.
Other questions? Yes?
Is there any way to bring down this cost and not have the finest of finest? I mean, 11 million plus for the football field. We did go into the courthouse, anybody can do it, you go into the treasurer's office. Those people know exactly what they're doing, that is what they do. And I said, how will our taxes change? Took her 10 minutes, this is a professional, that's exactly what they do. With hesitation, she showed me the figure. For us, it would be, and I suppose that's everybody, like 3 if you pay fall taxes, spring taxes, again, that amount. 50% increase. You multiply what individually we would pay over 20 years, knowing that assessment goes up. And that figure for one couple is staggering. How can we bring the cost down? And perhaps we don't need 11 million on a football.
Yeah, when bonds are done, you have to go with an estimate because you're not doing bids at the time. And so that's what would come later. So those are the things that we would have to look at. Referendum passes, like I said, November 8th, then we would look at what those bids would become and to see if things could be different at that time. There are escalation figures in that bid, also the contingency of about 17% of the total of the two. So
And when you also subtract, I know it's always nice to have new, of course, but if you subtract this high cost from remodel, you're saving 45 million. That's a lot of money that you're not spending. 45 million would be saved remodeling versus subtraction.
right, but the $700,000 though per year to keep 5 buildings compared to 3 buildings would also be one of those figures that we looked into because we looked at the data. Because if you're going to keep the 5 buildings, you're going to have all that same maintenance cost and all of the energy costs.
Considering the cost of maintaining a very big, large new school, that costs money.
Right, that's what Dr. Kuhn did. So actually the percentage or the square footage would be, that's the right word, square feet for the building is almost similar to the buildings that we have now. So that's why we took the highest cost building, multiplied it by 3 to get that savings of $700,000. So the new building more than likely would be more efficient than even these, even though we've had a lot of energy savings on these buildings. But with new technology, there would be savings. So there's not really, it's not going to be an added cost to that. It's already figured into the estimate of the energy cost and the maintenance.
It might be wise to see how to bring the cost down, because that is staggering to us, especially when you add in interest.
Right, that's a cap, and so it can't go any higher than that. So when we get into that situation later, then we have to look at that and see what could be possibly reduced and how that could be reduced. Yes?
Why can't we look at using the land that we have already in Northfield? So if we're gonna build a new building, build it on that footprint, where already have utilities. We would be buying new property, we would be buying new utilities, and we still have this new building, and that would wipe out a lot of cost. And it's not that far apart.
Right. I don't know where you're talking about because there's not really a lot of area there that's not being used right there as far as the property in
I mean,
Northfield.
you can build it on the football field, I mean, you can,
So did it have not a football field in it?
I mean, until we get it done building. I'm saying build a new school
Okay.
on that property that we currently own.
I'm sorry. I guess I don't understand exactly what you mean, but I guess we could talk about it later. But what I don't understand.
I'm
So
saying instead of building next to Hartman,
yeah.
we move the building project up to the property that's Northfield and build one within that property line at current Northfield.
Yeah, there's not enough room to build a new high school there. There's not I mean, even at the high school, even at the football field, that's just a small area. Yeah.
High school being the elementary school, Morganville High School will remain,
Right.
So you're telling me if we wiped out the football field and all the athletic fields outside, that we wouldn't have enough footprint there to build
You're saying the new high school then?
the new high school?
So where would you put all the athletic fields then?
Well, the elementary schools will be gone, right? Right, the high school, the two high schools, would be an elementary school there and a high school there.
Yeah. Well, one thing you mentioned though too, and I know when we talk about the ground, that is a very small part of the total project though. You have to look at that too, so that's why that's the best location for that.
So how many acres do we have up there in Norfolk right
It's just around 40 acres.
Yeah, around 40 acres.
And that's includes Sharp Creek.
now? So why do we need to buy 70-some acres for moving?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier as far as having the solar field. You look at the solar field at Oak Hill, for example. That's a good example. How many acres that takes to do the solar field to be more efficient. So that would be one reason.
Is that gonna make us money?
The solar field, yes, but definitely, it would reduce the cost of the utilities. So, yes. Yes.
Well, the old schools, what will happen when you consolidate? What will happen to the old schools? Can those be repurposed and sold? Will that be added to the bottom line?
Right. So three elementaries, by law, you have to leave them set for 2 years because a charter school can purchase one or something like that. And in Wabash County, I don't really see that happening necessarily, and then at that point, you can sell, just like what we did, what La Fountain, we maintained that for 2 years, and then we sold it. Just like Wabash City has sold several, not sold, but they have sold elementaries, just like Manchester actually demolished one of their elementaries too. So it's a 2-year process you have to maintain, and then you can sell, and unfortunately I don't like to say that word, or demolish. Depends, but there are certain people, certain areas, certain businesses that might be interested in those schools. Yes?
What if you leased out the other buildings, fixed them up, try to get some jobs in here to help support the community, and you'd still get funds from them other buildings that are gonna sit empty for 2 years?
Right. We have to leave. We do that by law. There's certain Indiana code that you have to follow. So, yeah, in other words, use that to be able to earn some extra money. Right.
So it is taken away from all of us taxpayers.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I know Dr. Kuhn talked about with the finances. There are many Indiana code. The Indiana code book, I can't even, my fingers aren't wide enough to say it's that thick. It's huge. So,
But what if you made it something to support the schools? Like a rehab center because of so many kids'
right.
problems.
Well, here again, we're trying to reduce the footprint so we can be more efficient. And if there's a way to make money, that might be an opportunity. But you have to make sure that you would want to make money instead of losing money on a venture like this.
Leasing the ground or you buying the ground over there?
It would be bought, but that wouldn't happen until after the referendum. So, yes.
When all this started in May, interest rates were lower and inflation was a little lower. Say this passes and inflation stays as much as it is, and I think I saw the chart, maybe the interest rates were 1.5 when we did this, now it's up about 3. How has that affected the $115 million? When you look at that, are you going to have to cut something out of the new building because you might overrun on cost, or what's that done with the overall interest over 20 years? What about 185 million, somewhere out there, 20 years? How much has that increased over 20 years with interest rates going up?
Yeah, our financial experts are the ones, and those are good questions. We have questions that we maybe have to ask them to explain that a little bit more.
Well, the bond is built with a possibility of a 5.5% interest rate already.
Just so everybody heard that, so the bond is built so it could be up to a 5.5% interest rate. So,
And just like with any project, I mean, after you go, I guess just like after any project that we've done, we've been involved in other projects before. You work with the architects, you work with the designers, you work with the construction firms. You build out what you would like to have, and then when those bids come back, sometimes you got to cut things out of there. And so, that just kind of depends. That's another way of lowering costs, but that also helps factor in any of those additional increase in costs that might come down the road.
Hello? Are they calling in? Question? Yes?
Hi.
Patrick.
Piggybacks somewhat on the question that was just answered, but you specifically referenced that the $70 million to improve the buildings instead of building new would also be impacted negatively by inflation, but you didn't touch on that with the cost of building new. And we've got inflation rising, cost of building materials rising. Looking at Columbia City, which was finished 2 years ago, their projected costs were ended $30 million higher than where they started. And so my question is, we know inflation is going to hit. We know that building materials are going up. So will you push the estimated price that you're presenting now up to deal with those expenses, or will you cut things to deal with those expenses? And based on that answer, if you're cutting things, is there a hierarchy of what would be cut to stay in the current price?
Was that 3 questions into one?
It was not, it was just a lot of information.
Okay. All right. So to start out with, number one, the 115 can't change. So that can't change. So we know that. And so I think Dr. Kuhn kind of addressed that a little bit already. You have to look at what happened with that. Now, they're $30 million, and I did go drive past their school and actually talked to their superintendent here just recently. But that $30 million also is quite a bit larger school, probably twice as much as ours. That's why when our architects put that figure together, they actually added that escalation. We never had that before. So we had all the other bonds we've had, we've always had that contingency, but we've never had an escalation. So they had the escalation built into that.
But their estimate started at $64 million and ended in the 90s for a school that's twice as big as ours. So now we're starting at 121, and for a school that's half the size. So knowing that we're going to run into some adverse economic conditions. So you're saying that we've got a hard lock on the amount, and you would cut things from the plan to make it work as prices go up.
Yeah, unfortunately, if it's locked in by Indiana code and by bonding, that's 115. It's 115.
And just, I want to throw in a celebration too. You guys have done a great job, Mike and Chris, dealing with the facts and the information and sharing that here with people tonight. I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
My question for Kevin, here 4 or 5 years ago when we started the idea of reconfiguration, Kevin, you stated that we built a building then that was going to be too big for water population decline that was currently going. And now we're going to build a new building. I want to know what went into your thinking. Why did you change your thinking?
It's fun to be able to tell a board member that needs to stand here.
I'm scared to get back up here. I was hiding there. When we were approaching that Northfield, Southwood, taking Southwood kids to Northfield, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and then you said if we build a new building today, then it's going to be too big for what we needed because the population is, been declining for years,
Yeah.
and it doesn't look like it'll stop.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm sorry, I don't remember saying that, but I possibly could have. I'll go ahead and answer that whole, because that is another possibility. It was still under study. It's still an open door as far as moving Southwood kids here to Northfield, but there's some tremendous downside to that. First off, it's a personal thing about integrating. What's the best way to integrate Northfield and Southwood, and that would definitely be in a new facility, not taking Southwood kids here north. There is also some pushback, and very rightly so, that if you take Southwood kids to Northfield, then you've displaced, not displaced, you've used up the room at Northfield so the junior hires would possibly have to come back down here. And I was very sympathetic to the Rowan people because I personally would hate to be driving my very young child back and forth between the Rowan area and clear down here to the south. So that always weighed on my mind, the whole back and forth. We were moving two different directions. You know, we were moving there, kids that way, and then we were moving kids back this way. So there's no perfect answer here, but I am totally convinced that to bring about the best way to integrate Northfield and Southwood together, once again for the academic piece, and that's immense, is to do it in a new place. And I know it goes counterintuitive to say, yes, you're struggling, which by the way, we've gained students in the last 2 years, if I'm correct. Our ADM's going up. We actually gained, I mentioned all those other districts that we surround. We have a net positive gain from every one of those districts. We don't lose more to them than we get from them. But anyhow, that's, yeah, I guess I'm rambling on, so sorry.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I know Captain Bowman said, let's talk about consolidation. Why haven't we even had any discussion with Wabash City? I mean, I understand that you're Wabash and all that, would love to have a MSD of Wabash, but why haven't we discussed with them trying to get Wabash City to join us? And then you could you could still keep the two high schools and make Wabash High School K through 8. And then you could solve a lot of busing problems, because you still have the two north and south schools.
Yeah, you might be better at this than me.
Thank you.
I get myself in trouble because I talk too much. Yeah, Wabash, that's a whole other issue. I was hoping to also express that our current cash position as of tonight is roughly $19 million in all of our cash positions. To entertain a conversation with Wabash, there's not a lot there to offer MSD. We're trying to do what is best for MSD. I got myself a little bit of hot water the other day, and it was not deserved, because I said that I am elected to represent MSD. I don't represent, as that particular fellow said, I should represent all the students in Wabash County, and I disagree with that, rightfully so. And there has been some in my time period, there has been some back and forth discussions on some things. But as far as sitting down and having formalized, I don't see any value to it right now. Right now, I don't see any value to it.
But you would end up with, you could close all the elementaries in Wabash City and just have one elementary school and one combined town, and then you'd end up with 5 schools.
You're saying to bring Wabash City kids out here, or
The high school.
yeah, they were totally against that.
Yes.
Well, the Wabash City schools just put in a new football field. And if you merge somehow, they have a brand new field there. There's savings. That's a big savings.
Still be good for junior high.
Yeah.
Other questions? Mike?
Yeah, if the referendum fails, you've listed some things, 70 million to retain all schools, possible shuffling the reconfiguration of grades. The retaining all schools doesn't seem to meet any of your goals. The other one does, at least meets 2 of them. So is plan B to do the reconfiguration of schools? And if so, how much is that?
So I'll say the same thing again, like I said last time when you asked that we are concentrating on this plan. But I will say, though, that I do read social media too, unfortunately. I don't read it at nighttime because I know I won't be able to sleep, because I don't engage in with those people that are are not, they're misinformed or uninformed about situations. But even if we would look at reconfiguration, it cannot be like we planned it last time, because we have 8 other classrooms now that we have with our preschool. So when people write in social media that this is exactly what we're going to do, that is not the plan. Because we don't have that plan, because we're concentrating, and I'll just say it again, Michael, we're planning, this is what we're working towards. And we also know that there'll be at least one new board member, come January 1, and so they would have to be able to know everything and get caught up to speed to be able to look at what other possibilities are if the referendum doesn't pass. And so
none of the other things you've looked into are currently in play for maybe.
those are things that we have discussed, yes, but they're not what we're discussing right now, because there's a lot of work to be done, and you know that there's a lot of work to be done with giving the information. You know, we have probably close to 3,000 people that will vote, maybe more than that, on November 8th. And although I love to have this many people here to be able to listen, at least ask questions, we're a far cry from getting to everybody. And hopefully people are getting on our website. Actually, even on our website, you can ask questions that will come directly to us, and somebody will contact you through text, through phone, or through email if you ask those questions. And so, let me finish this.
Okay, yeah.
So we just need a lot more people to understand and listen and to hear that. So that's why we're concentrating on that and trying to get that information out. Yes?
And I want to say thanks and appreciate since you're recording this meeting. Hopefully it will be posted to as long as relevant.
Well, I don't know if we're going to do that one, but we're doing this one because I don't want to stand behind this line every time. I'd rather walk up and down a little more. Yes, sir.
You talked about we talked about reconfiguration probably, I don't know when, 5-6 years ago, and we've had different thoughts and ideas. How many different plans have you guys looked at? Have we only looked at 1 or 2, or have we looked at 5 or 6 different ideas? I mean, just in this meeting, we've had consolidation. We've talked about reconfiguration that was attempted a few years ago, and now new buildings. So we've had at least 3 plans. Has there been others that have been looked at?
I don't know what other necessarily, you mentioned, of course, new school that actually has these buildings still being used for elementary, middle school. You mentioned consolidation. We mentioned reconfiguration or shuffling. There's a lot of variables to all of that, and actually, like I just said, it would change. It would be different than what it was when we first talked about it, because we're using a lot more classrooms, because we're investing, and people don't realize that, but we're investing in our community too, as far as having all of the preschool 3 and 4-year-olds. You have to realize that one of the big needs in Wabash County also is childcare. It's not childcare, it's actually education. It's paths to quality. We have to be licensed to be able to serve these students, the 3 and 4-year-olds. And so it's very, very important, and we continue to do that. It's an investment. We do not meet all of our, we do not meet all of our expenses for that, so it's an investment. It's an investment because we do want to help people out, and we want to get those children to be prepared to be, going to kindergarten. So I didn't really answer your question other than, yes, there's been a lot of things that we've talked about, but we also have a strategic plan.
Right.
Yeah, we moved grade levels. I think you probably are familiar with what we've done Metro North because of the increase in preschool. We moved those 3rd grade to Sharp Creek, and then just this year we moved Southwood Elementary 6th graders to this building here. So we have already done some of that shuffling. So those are plans that we have done to make it work to be able to have our preschool programs. Other questions? Yes?
I would like to thank the board and the administration for caring about the educational aspect and not always getting hung up on just moving buildings. I think that is a very high priority on their part, and for really spending a lot of time on that, as well as not getting, throwing us away financially in combining us with Wabash, throwing us away financially with them.
All right. There, somebody had a question right here. Yes.
I feel sorry for Kevin Bowman because of that. I think he is about the same age as I am. We went through consolidation once before. You know, I went to Urbana. We had LaGrove, we had Rowan, Chip Walmo. We all got together as one group. We didn't fight as a family of, you know, we accepted each other. You know, it's going to happen the same thing here. If we send kids to, our Southwood kids to the new school, and they bring kids in from Northfield to the new school, they're going to get along. You know, they're just going to accept life is a big question to begin with. But they're going to get along once they get together. You know, they're all going to be friends.
I have to agree to that 100%. I'm from Southwood. My wife's from Northfield. We've been married 37 years. It works.
We've been married 55. She's from Southwood. I'm from Northfield.
Wow. Congratulations. 55 years. Teresa.
Proud Southwood grad, married to a Northfield grad, so
There you go.
same thing. Jumping into the future, the next plan after the school is built is then to turn Southwood and Northfield into pre-K-8 buildings. So being a grad, I know this building pretty well, and I can't imagine a configuration that would go preschool 8 and keep those, you know, separated at a certain level. I have worked in Milford Elementary where they're a K-8 building, so I know it's possible. But can you just share a little bit? I think you've been asked a lot about what that looks like when we bring K-8 or pre-K-8 into these buildings.
Yeah, I haven't been asked tonight, so thank you for asking, because I have been asked at least 2 other meetings. This is our, what is this? This is our 5th meeting, I think, so far. So that's a great question. And so we do know that we can separate students. And so I'll give you a couple things. First of all, my wife's a kindergarten teacher. My wife typically is always with her students. And if she's not with her students, then another teacher is. And another thing is, I actually went and called a couple of superintendents. Rossville, for example. Rossville is a K through, and probably pre-K. I don't know, I never did ask that question. But pre-K, I know for sure, K through 12. You start at 1, they actually share some of the same facilities. They might have the same library, they have the same cafeteria. And so it's really based on scheduling. So just like here, we wanted to make sure that when we talked about bringing the 6th grade up, and I know it's different what you're saying, but when we brought the 6th grade up, we wanted to look at how are we going to keep those students separated from everyone else. And I know we've done that very successfully because it's based on different passing periods, it's based on different lunches, and different lunch or cafeteria, lunchtime. And so it can all work, it just has to be based on those scheduling and using the rooms properly and how that works. And so other schools are doing that, not just pre-K through 8th grade, but they're going all the way from, probably, I shouldn't say that because I don't know for sure, they probably have pre-K, just to say K all the way through 12, using the same facilities. Just like right now, we also already have pre-K students and seniors on the same bus. And so there are ways to do that. And actually, we had a teacher, and I don't think that teacher's here, but she was giving an example of she being a 2nd grade teacher, never seeing her preschool in just a Metro North Elementary because they do the same thing on different schedules. And let me say that again. So she's a 2nd grade teacher, her granddaughter is in preschool, and they never see each other during the day. They see each other at the beginning of the day, because she helps take care of her at the end of the day, but not during the day because they are separated, just like we would separate our pre-K through 8th grade. Good question. Everybody has good questions. So, other questions? The lights go off at 10 o'clock, so we have another hour and a half. So, fire away. Yes, sir.
If you end up with a new high school, are we guaranteed that Wabash City Schools won't end up deciding they want to end up there?
Basically, how that works, you have to have 2 or more boards that have pretty much an identical resolution to do that. So I don't know if there's ever a guarantee about anything in life. But that's how that works. If you want to know, that's Indiana code. I don't have it memorized.
Guarantee of increased taxes all
All of that.
Say that again.
I said, there is a guarantee in life that taxes are gonna go up.
Yeah, in life and death, right? We already talked about that. Because we're not going to be here in 60 years. Thank you, Dr. King, for reminding us of that. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes.
Is there any information that you can share regarding transportation? I mean, as an example, if you're shuttling kids farther into a new high school location, we know that transportation time frames would increase for kids that ride the bus that live in Somerset or on the south side near Grant County.
Not necessarily, just because if we would do some more, take away some of the regular routes to do express busing, we could do it that way. Also, when we look at those students that are younger, say freshmen and sophomore that don't have licenses and things like that, and those that don't go to Heartland already, those students actually, I lost my train of thought. I'll just tell you that right now. Yeah. Well, anyway, we would look at that. One thing you have to look at too is that it's about 7 miles from here to Heartland Career Center. So, although you do have to go through town, I realize that it's about 4 miles from Northville to Heartland Career Center. So, busing is something that we would just have to look at. But here again, we're not talking about a large number of students that would even ride the bus. I know what I was going to say now. So, those students like in 9th and 10th grade, there are some school districts, and we would look at this also for convenience of parents. We would look at having that extra route for, in other words, if they had practices here, or not here, but at the new school, and then we would shuttle them back to, say, a centralized area to Southwood that would be closer. Some schools do that. I know Huntington for sure, I know does that. They do that more for junior high, but we could do that for our other students, because there would not be that many that we would have to shuttle for that purpose.
Thank you.
Right, yeah, nothing would change from pre-K through 8th because they would still be in the same locations, Northwood and Southwood. Yes?
First of all, I wanted to just applaud the board and yourself for getting out to so many locations within the county. I've only lived in Wabash County for a year, and I'll have no grandchildren go to any of these schools. I'll have no great-grandchildren go to any of these schools. But my wife and I support public education. Just wanted to thank you for that. For those of us that are on fixed incomes, just wanted to know when the tax increases would go into effect for us so we could do some pre-planning.
Right. That would be in 2024. And actually, more than likely, I think I can say this, that the taxes will actually go down next year to 2023 because of those 2 bonds that would be paid off this year.
Okay, so would that be 2024 payable in 2025?
We would take bonds out in 2023.
So it would be payable in 2024,
So
yes.
then those would be paid back on our end starting in 2024. So that's when collections would start happening.
So yes, 2023 to 2024. Payable in 2024.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Out of the 5 buildings and your current staff, the total amount of staff, how many staff are we going to cut by 1 3 buildings?
With our education, you have to think about that too. So think about elementary, for example. Elementary, there will be no changes. You're still going to have those same sections. For the most part, we have 3 sections or 4 sections of each grade level, and that's just based on enrollment. So last year, one class we had 2 sections, but ended up we had several students that moved into the district. So we went to 3 sections there, and then we have 1 kindergarten grade. Well, that's at Metro North right now that has 4 sections. So that would not change at all. We are looking that we would actually keep our educational staff. And if you think about that too, when we're talking about 27, 2028, we have a lot of teachers, that are close to my age or even older. And so we are looking at keeping all of our educational staff so we would be able to add more programming. So I mentioned just briefly that there's that 400-plus page of the curriculum or the courses that they have in the state of Indiana that you can offer. And so instead of just having some of the basics, we still have a lot of dual credit in AP, but maybe we have some other things that the students would be interested in, say in English or even math too, social studies and science, so those core area classes. So we would be able to retain this. Financially, we're very strong, so we would be able to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that later on, if someone retires and we don't need that section anymore, then we may go ahead and not replace that. But that's what happens in all the school districts around now. Sometimes that happens if you don't necessarily need that particular position anymore through attrition. Yeah, Mr. Daisy said something we did not say in this meeting. Sometimes we forget what we said in all the other meetings. But this is called a capital or construction referendum. And some schools, Huntington, for example, they did a capital construction referendum at the same time they did an operational. It's a little confusing because operational is usually looking at maintenance and utilities. But in this particular case, when they say operational referendum, that is for increasing salaries, increasing benefits, increasing programming. In other words, adding teachers. And so, in essence, even though this is not two referendums, and it is almost like two referendums, because with the savings of utilities, and the maintenance and those inflationary costs that can happen, we actually could look at increasing those programming, also those salaries and benefits for our staff. Right now, hopefully the board, if you come to our board meeting next Tuesday, we will have an agenda item as far as ratifying the teacher contract, which is an excellent recommendation that we have for the board if they vote on it. And so that's one thing that is one thing that we can do because we are financially healthy. Yes, sir. Ted.
I think we're all feeling the pinch of the energy prices, the electric costs, the fuel costs. What I want to know is part of this consolidation and the way the gyms are built, is there a weakness with the size of the gyms and having heat during the February time? Would that improve if you do that, or has the architect taken that part of the equation into account? The size of the gyms, the amount of heat that you're eating in February, I think that's huge, and I think that might be something to look at.
We just make all the kids run a lot faster in February and we turn the heat down. So if that works, yeah. No, actually, so when we look at that, the whole plan, though, is to make us more efficient and add programming. And this is exactly what that would do, because if you go from 5 school buildings to 3 school buildings, that makes a big difference. And I will tell you also, we actually have, and it was up here, we didn't spend a lot of time on that because we were talking maybe too much. I don't know. I wasn't. These guys were. But anyway, we talked about one of the schools, actually Shark Creek Elementary, uses almost as much utilities than what Northfield or Southwood does, and the sizes are so much different. It's because when it was built in 1980, they thought it was the best system since sliced bread, but it wasn't. So we actually run, the heat and the cooling sometimes at the same time, just to make sure you keep the moisture out. So this is what this does. It actually helps out with what you're just talking about. Now, when you're talking about gyms, though, also new gyms, new energy savings, using solar fields, insulation, higher tempered glass that's better in most of the new buildings that have, so it would be more efficient. But actually, Dr. Kuhn used the highest cost of one of the buildings is just multiplied by 3. So that's why I say it's a very conservative estimate of how much the savings for the utility and maintenance would be. Hope I answered your question. Yes, back here first.
Did we get more than one estimate from different builders, or did we just pick one and go with it?
Here again, it's...
And my other question is, if this doesn't pass, is there any chance that you guys are still going to go through with it?
Well, number one, an estimate is just through an architect, not through a builder. So the architects that we're using and what we've used for different projects for many, many years, they've built a lot of schools, they've done a lot of different things, and they rely on different people, they rely on construction people. So there was only one architect that gave us a quote, an estimate, I'm sorry, so it's an estimate. And then what happens is, then you start going to the bidding process, and then you find out what that is. So that's why they put the escalation charge, or the escalation price there, plus the contingency to make sure that works. And your second question was, will we be built anyway? We won't be allowed to build anyway if the referendum doesn't pass.
Well, I mean, it just says in here that it can be completed without asking for voter approval. So I'm just wondering if this was voted.
Yeah, different projects. So there's different levels that has to go just to the board. So it's based on a formula for our particular school district or anybody's particular school district. And so when we said that the taxes will more than likely keep on going up, is because of all of these projects that are in the pipeline, what Mr. Bolden was talking about. And so if we do not pass and we have to fix up all of the buildings, all 5 schools, then we're going to have those projects that will have to be completed, and it's going to be expensive. Yeah, renovation, yeah, versus building. Did I answer your question?
Sort of.
I'll ask it again. I'll try it again.
No, I just want to know, will you build this school if it's voted down?
No.
Okay.
Unless someone here donates $115 million. So, yes.
You can attest to the fact that I went to some of the Grow Wabash meetings. You and I were both there. I know of 3 other ladies that went to a total of 6 meetings in the beginning. And I don't think this has been talked about a lot. So when I went to that meeting, and the other ladies that went to the meeting, the outcome is like, what do you feel we needed to do to grow Wabash? And all of these, we weren't at every one, but we were at the majority. I think they only had 6 meetings.
I don't remember.
Well, anyhow, we had the majority of the meetings. And out of all of those meetings that was held, everybody said, we need jobs to grow Wabash. So when it came out in the paper that we needed to build 1 new consolidated school, I was shocked. So then they had another online meeting, and I attended that meeting as well. And when I got on there, I started to realize that all of the people on the line with that meeting were all people from the Grow Wabash team. So out of that survey again, guess what? They said, we need a consolidated school district. Is it not true that Wabash City Schools is tax capped? The city pays, taxpayers are capped.
I don't have all of those figures. I think every school district has tax caps. In other words, because the 1% and 2% and the 3%. And so I don't know if all of them are, but yes, there's a lot. I mean, I know that Wabash City loses a lot. We lose some, but we are not in that situation as much as they are because of the municipality of Wabash City and the tax caps. I don't think I answered your question either. But,
Well, what I'm getting to is if they are capped, they have nowhere else to pull money from. So if they get us all consolidated, then they have an avenue, and that is from the county. So people need to keep that in mind when you're going to vote, regardless of your vote. You do need to keep that in mind, that there is this huge push to consolidate all the county schools. And I believe in MSD enough that I pulled a great amount of business from Wabash We have a great school system. We need to support it.
Thank you. We have a great team, all staff. Yes, that's shared.
I just wanted to add, and I think everybody heard this, but I work in the school, and I'm in 5 different school corporations. We have wonderful school corporations surrounding, just even MSD. I'm so proud to be an employee of MSD schools. MSD is bursting at the seams. And in case people don't understand that, when I go to Southwood Elementary, I'm not a regular there every day. I don't have a spot. I have to find a spot to work because there is no room for us to do our evaluations when we work with our preschoolers. We have to plan ahead and somebody loses their room for a time, or we have to be in a cramped space. When I go to Metro North, we have a spot usually, but they have 4 preschool programs or 5.
5.
They have 5 preschool programs, and they have a waiting list. And maybe Southwood Elementary does too, I don't know that for sure. We have a waiting list of preschoolers who want to come to school at MSD, who can't because we have no room. So I think I just want to repeat, we are bursting at the seams. Other schools, we may see that, other school systems may be looking at shutting down a building because they don't need that building anymore. I don't hear that as a problem at MSD. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Mike, the chart you put up showed that most of the buildings are less than 70% capacity. Is that correct? Just to ask that question. Well, the only building bursting at the seams is maybe Southwood L.
Metro North is bursting at the seams.
Yeah, some of those figures that we put up were prior to 2021. So we've added 8 preschool classes, and so that's why we had to change. Maybe we need to update that, but we had to change, and we moved the 3rd grade to Sharp Creek, like we've already mentioned. So now it's full. It wasn't full before, though. That's exactly right. Now it is because we moved those classes, and because of Southwood Elementary, we moved the 6th grade up here because of space. We were not able to add any preschool programming because of that.
And I go into other school corporations that do wonderful jobs. So I'm not bashing Wabash City, I'm not bashing Manchester, North Miami, Peru. I see wonderful things, but MSD is bursting at the seams, and they need to grow. And until we do something different, they're not going to grow.
Other questions?
Follow up on this preschool.
Is that A for Alabama?
Yeah.
How's she doing? Okay.
Doing great. And it's because of a great education.
Full ride scholarship, right?
Yeah.
All right.
The question I have is preschool fully self-sustaining?
Yeah.
What I mean by that, do we break down the cost of what it costs to ride that bus, to the square footage of buildings that we're using, the utilities and all that, or are we just paying for the teacher only?
So to go back to your first question, is it self-sustaining because of the finances we get? That's no. I mentioned earlier that it's an investment, and it is an investment. There are different ways. So in other words, if a preschool student has been identified with a special education need, we get monies for that. But it's still not enough money. If all of them got it, we still would not have enough to pay for the staffing that we have. So it's an investment. Number 2, we do charge, and we have it on a rolling scale. So in other words, if they are on full meal schedule, then they pay a certain amount. If they're on reduced, they pay a lower amount. And if they're free, they pay a lower amount yet. And so all of those figures together, though, I don't know, put Dr. Kuhn on the spot there, but it's a lot of money that we're investing so we can offer this for our students. So the answer has the quality. Right, so we go, since we are past the quality number 3, which most of the preschools in Wabash County and surrounding areas are that way, but to get that, we can get some other funding, and we have got some other funding, but still, again, it is an investment. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but the answer to your question is...
So from a business standpoint, we're losing money.
It's an investment.
Right, I mean, it's an investment in the future, but
right.
From a business standpoint, preschool is a tax or a cost to the rest of the schools corporation.
But you got to look at it from marketing.
understand that, but I just want to know,
Yeah.
you know, because we're taking up 8 classrooms, now we're gonna have to build a new building. If we didn't take up 8 classrooms,
Well, that's not necessarily, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about putting the high school students together. So we're talking about 9 through 12, being able to put them together to be able to have the efficiency and the programming for those students. Because here again, you know, we can make the elementaries work. You know, whether it's 50 kids in the class, 75 or 100, you can make those sections, and we do that. We're flexible all the time. So in other words, this year, every elementary class except one has 3 sections. Now, if we need 4 sections, we'll do 4 sections because the one at Metro North needed 4 sections. If we need to go down to 2, we'll go down to 2. But in high school, it's a lot different when you're talking about that because of the classes that they take and the variety of electives and all the core area classes that you have. So you are right, and I mentioned that earlier. Our preschool program is an investment. And when you say investment, that means we are putting money towards it so we can have that program. I believe most schools are probably in the same situation, but we do tap into other programming. Like I said, since we're past equality rating number 3, we can get some funding. Some of the parents can get funding that we actually receive for that. And we could charge more too, but we have to make sure it's affordable for our parents. And actually, I would think that most people that are doing it would say that it's more affordable than having just daycare, because daycare is probably more expensive than what we are charging for those that are doing full pay. And there's a lot of kids that aren't on full pay. They're on that reduced and on the free. When I say free, they still are charged a little bit, but it's very minimal. It's a lot cheaper than Alabama, that's for sure. Unless it's a full ride.
If this fails, when's the next time you could try to do another referendum?
Good question. For the same exact project, it's 2 years unless you go to the DLGF or you go to somebody. Yeah, you can appeal to try to get it down to a year. So it's 1 to 2 years. Ted, we only get 2 questions each. Go ahead, I'm just kidding.
If the referendum fails, can you do some more studies on the energy efficiency of the gyms?
We could do that now, actually. We could
Have you already done that?
I guess I don't know specifically what you mean, because if you think about a new building is going to have all the latest energy efficiencies that you can put into a new building. Like for Northfield and Southwood, for example, we did a 10-year energy savings contract that actually cost, I don't know, it was like almost $600,000 or $700,000 per year to make these buildings a lot more efficient. Like I said, Sharp Creek Elementary it cost almost as much as a large building like this. And so, I don't know.
We've upgraded all of our high schools to LED lighting. That was a project we worked on for a few years there. We've not been able to do those at our elementaries yet at this point in time. So we've done some things. I think like even our boilers right now, I think they operate at 60% efficiency. And so newer stuff is going to operate at a higher efficiency.
Did you hear all that back there? Okay. It won't be picked up on the camera though, so. Well, we still have an hour and 5 minutes, so it might go off. So, no, if there's nothing else, I will say that we'll be up here. You can come up, and if you did want to ask questions in front of everybody else, you can come up. I'll stay here as long as you want me to stay here to talk. But I will say, being a Southwood product, graduating from Southwood, also my wife, my children, my dad being a teacher here, I'm very excited about the possibilities for our students. That we could do even more. There are a lot of great things going on, and we'll continue to do those great things no matter what. But we also look to the future, how we can be more viable for the next 60 years to be able to provide programming and efficiencies for our students, our staff, and for our community. And so it is very, very exciting that we have this opportunity. And And here again, thank you for coming, because really, it's going to be a small percentage of people that actually will even listen to us, but you're going to be more informed when you go to the polls. And we just hope that you tell other people to come listen, come ask questions, come to me, ask questions, or any of the guys up here. They'll talk with you. Our next presentation, our next meeting will be at Northfield at 9 a.m. on Saturday. And then we're going to have another one in Somerset at 9 a.m. And I don't have that date memorized, but it's on the following Saturday. So 2 Saturdays in a row. And if you have a place that you want us to come and talk to a group of people, we're willing to do that if we have the schedule open to do that, because we want to make sure people are informed. You obviously get to make your own choice in the matter, but we want you to be informed. My biggest fear is that we will have people go to the polls that are misinformed or uninformed. And so hopefully they're all informed when they go to the polls on November 8th. So again, thank you for coming. We'll stay up here. Appreciate your time tonight coming out.